only lesson I learned on how to be an artist is to like not stop doing it. And then, years later, you're like, oh, I'm an artist just because I just kept doing it.
Kept going, yes.
Yeah.
This is the Art Power Podcast. I'm Janera Solomon. Today I'm talking with artist friend Jon Rubin about community and collaboration and working alongside and through doubt. Jon's practice spans many disciplines. His work has included everything from creating a nomadic art school to a restaurant that serves food from countries with which the U.S. is in conflict. We begin the conversation with a pivotal moment in Jon's career, having studied as a painter, when he realizes he could shift or expand what it means to be an artist, and that he could make work from his everyday experience. Here's Jon.
I studied painting as an undergrad in Philly. And, the beauty of like studying in a traditional arts environment was like, you are given a set of materials, you're giving a set of histories. And fundamentally to me, art school was like, how do you break those histories and materials and reuse them towards your own purpose? Mm-hmm. But the tool set was pretty limited. It was fairly traditional forms of art. Mm-hmm. I mean, after I graduated from undergraduate school, I just crashed and burned in painting. I don't know, as a painter, I was okay, but I didn't believe, I didn't care. I didn't think it had any meaning. It didn't have any meaning for me. I felt my relationship to making the paintings was interesting, but the paintings' relationships to the world outside of myself was uninteresting. Until I was like exposed to the fact that like my entire social universe could be a material to be questioned and remade, could be the tool set, that got repurposed, changed, used the wrong way towards different aims. Mm-hmm. And, that was like liberating for me.
What brought you to that awakening that you're talking about? I mean, going from studying painting and like, feeling like, okay, maybe I'm an okay painter.
Yeah.
But what brought you to this other idea? Like,
I was ready, when you're in that spot, you're just ready for a change, but you don't know what that change is. And it took me a while. It took me till I moved out to California. I went to California College of Arts and Crafts in the Bay Area. And there were just some really incredible folks that I came in contact with. Suzanne Lacey, who was teaching there, who's really like coming out of, feminist and performance art. And this artist, Mark Thompson, who was an artist who taught at CCAC, and all of his work was with honeybees that he has raised for generations. His father raised bees as well.
Oh, wow.
It's this beautiful, fully ingrained process with a species that is non-human that he gave the primary sort of agency to. And he said gave up his life to thinking about the life of the bees and then thinking about the bees as a social sort of organization. Like the work was political, it was poetic, it was personal, and it was goddamn bees. Like his whole work was with honeybees. I was like, you could do that? Wow. You could do art that's just working with honeybees? Like,
and call it art?
And call it art. Like I could do anything. And I didn't know what that meant, but like that was the thing that allowed me the excuse to do something I didn't know anything about. And like, I grew up in Philly. I went to school in Philly. I was no longer like my parents' son. I was just someone kind of dislocated from their prior identity in a really healthy way. Mm-hmm. And so I could do something and people would think that that's the type of artist I was. And so I just started collaborating with other artists. So my work is just fully from that moment on was based on conversation and collaboration. I started a project in a storefront with my friend Harold Fletcher, who was another student, in which we created an art space that only made work about people who lived in the neighborhood.
Wow.
And the whole idea was that the main audience are people walking by this storefront. And so we'll make work about them, create an incredibly closed loop where we're not going to some exotic place or creating work about an important subject. We're creating it just about daily life, and we're showing it to the people who, walking by on a daily basis.
What did that work look like, by the way?
It looked like a gallery. We called it Gallery Here.
Oh.
The notion was if we got kicked out, we we would just, wherever else we landed, we'd make work about that place. And to be honest, like, I think fundamentally that's all I've done ever since. That same methodology of wherever you land, there's the work. And there's also the audience for that work. There's no sort of waiting to get the big show, to get the money for the grant in order to be able to get like the right audience at a museum or a gallery. We were making it, we paid $1 rent. We were there for about 1.5 years. We did like 12 shows. If a show sucked, we would just like close it in a week. You know, we were just making up an institution, like a gallery as institution, but really what it was like a form of like creating stories with the public that we were working within.
So I want to ask you a money question, because this, after all, is the Art Power podcast, and we talk about money. This kind of this awakening and opening up of like the possibilities creatively. What is that standing on? Are you thinking about that at that moment, or you're like, I'm just so excited I found this new thing?
Yeah. I mean, I was living in Oakland. I was hustling multiple jobs, working in restaurants. Like, you know, I'm making enough of a living to do the work. At that time, and probably for years, there was a difference between my money making and my art making. Like, you know, I was doing the work and it didn't really relate to, you know, my jobs, and my jobs didn't relate to my work. That actually shifted later in my life. But, you know, and I was working, California had this artist in residency program where you could get paid to work 20 hours a week.
Wow.
I worked at the Berkeley Senior Center. I worked at alcohol and drug treatment facility. I worked at a middle school creating like art programs. So for 6 years, I was actually supported out of school to kind of get my legs under me. And I was developing projects that were quasi-pedagogically artistic, right? So I was starting to blur the boundary between teaching and art making and money making and art making. But still, mostly the projects were developed kind of with zero budgets, directly in the public. That was really important to me. Like, the studio was the public.
So I'm curious, you know, that idea of the economic life and the artistic life being separate. I hear a lot of artists who have a kind of expectation that they'll graduate if they've gone to school for art, or if they've just started to do it, and they're trying to figure out, you know, how to make money from art. And that's very, very clear to them very early on that the two things should go together. It sounds like you never had that expectation, or did you? And then sort of shift away from it?
I didn't think I was ever going to make any money, certainly from the work I was making at that point, because I wasn't painting. I didn't have any commodities. I was making these sort of conceptual projects in, you know, and with my community. And even then, that was a sort of nascent practice. Now, like, it's a way in which many artists work. I was really also interested in teaching. And I thought perhaps that could be, and has become, fortunately, a way to like make a living and then make the work. But I have to say, like, I lived in the Bay Area. I applied for 7 years just to get an adjunct job, and I didn't get anything. So there were 7 years of just doing gigs and making the work. And then I got some adjunct work at one school, and it kind of built to adjunct work at another school. And, you know, I was making maybe $35,000 living in the Bay Area. It's expensive.
Wow.
That's not a lot of money. I was struggling, but living cheaply. I was young enough to be able to do that. Didn't have a family yet. And was really continuing to make work. That was kind of the key. That's what kept me really alive. You know, like, my adjunct labor in multiple different art schools was fairly invisible. No one really knew what I was doing on a daily basis. And I didn't know if I'd get hired from moment to moment. I felt no agency within it. But yet I felt like the work I was doing in the classroom was incredibly important. Yeah. And I decided to create my own art school called the Independent School of Art. The premise was, I showed up to class one day and I told the students, like, what if this school didn't exist? What if, like, your tuition didn't exist, the building didn't exist, the history didn't exist, the diploma didn't exist? Would we still show up? And if we showed up, would the nature of what we do shift? Because all we have is our, like, commitment to each other. There's like a social architecture as opposed to a physical one.
Yeah. And our passions and interests and curiosities.
We're co-constructing this live on a moment-by-moment basis. But I felt that the institution had kind of disengaged us from each other. I mean, I feel this now.
Yeah.
And it was a question that I put out, and students were like, yeah, I'm down.
That's awesome.
Let's do it. And I was like, okay. And I created this art school that ran for 2 years in the Bay Area. And it was, one of the premises was it was completely nomadic. So we had no site. We had to kind of almost parasitically exist on pre-existing spaces within the Bay, as well as people's homes and lives. It was woven into their actual existence, not just like a separate institutional space.
Yeah. And you had permission for all those spaces. It wasn't like you just happened upon them. Okay.
Sometimes. I mean, a lot of it was just showing up, and we'd go to a we want to watch a video, we go to a restaurant that has a video screen and ask if we could like screen videos. I mean, it was also based on barter. I was experimenting with what if the exchange of our labor and time is valued in a different form.
Yeah.
And so, I just had a kid. I needed babysitting. I was doing a lot of work, but we have a guest speaker come. Like, what can we give to that speaker that's not just monetary? How can we, and this was like in 2 years, I don't think I ever solved this, but it was an interesting question to pose every semester to the group is like, what are our resources? Yeah. What are our labors, and how can we share them? And how can the school be the work that we co-make together? And how can it change based on who's part of the group at any given point? And ironically, then, I had a kid and it became really untenable to live in the Bay Area economically. Yeah. And so I started applying for jobs.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And this fake art school I created probably got me my job here at Carnegie Mellon.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So moving to Pittsburgh was a no-brainer?
I grew up in Philly, man. Pittsburgh was not a place people in Philly like moved to or thought about, or like, it was, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was not planning on it. I started teaching, hey, it was the first time I had a real job. I was, I'm like 40, 42. I'd never had like a job with benefits.
Full-time, everything. Wow.
Never. Up to 40. 42, right? So I kind of just cobbled it together. My wife was making some money.
Yeah.
I was making a go of it, but it wasn't sustainable.
Right.
I moved to Pittsburgh. Like, we bought a house. Yeah. No one bought a house who was an artist in the Bay Area. It does not exist. And, I started renting storefronts as classrooms that the university was paying for as a way to like be in the city as the curriculum. Because I was like, man, I can't teach social practice just in a class stuck in a basement.
No.
And it was also a way for me to be and learn with the students, like to continue that practice. Mm-hmm. And then, a whole series of works kind of just flowed out of that experience. Also recognizing, oh my God, I have like incredible privilege and access. This private institution, fancy, expensive for students to go to. Most of our students are not from this city. They don't stay here after they go to Carnegie Mellon. I felt a responsibility for my educational life to be part of the life of the city. And I was thinking about how that could occur.
Yeah. And you've done some incredible projects here in Pittsburgh. Making work that engages with a public essentially means the good, the bad, and the ugly, to put it plainly. So engaging with courage with the good, the bad, and the ugly. From what you acknowledge is like a privileged position, relatively, quote, safe position, perhaps. How has that impacted or shaped some of that engagement?
I mean, so the privilege I had was I was getting a paycheck every year I knew I was going to get, and it was enough for my family to live on. That afforded me a kind of courage to do work that I might not have done otherwise, to experiment, to not worry about where the funding for projects were coming from again, to be able to try things in the public that might fail. I recognize that as a starting point. And then making work, one of the projects I've done is called Conflict Kitchen, which is a collaborative work with artist Don Waleski, which ran in Pittsburgh for 7 years. And it's a restaurant that only served food from countries the United States was in conflict with. Afghanistan, Cuba, Venezuela, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Palestine, North Korea, on a rotating basis, a daily restaurant. And what I learned from that was that anyone who walked into the restaurant was automatically a funder for this arts project.
That's right.
And then they were a participant.
Yes.
And they were the audience. They played every single role that you needed, whether they even knew it or not, which was kind of interesting to me. You know, we were thinking locally and nationally, like, how do we construct stories of people living in countries that our government is in conflict with? And how do we counter those stories and create empathy in the public space using food as a mechanism, but using also the economic model that I had learned that like a restaurant can do. And I'd worked for 15 years in restaurants prior to that. I'd never thought that they could be the structure for the welfare of an artwork. And they did, you know, I mean, Conflict Kitchen started, it wasn't making much money at all. We moved to a big, like the main public plaza in Pittsburgh. We had like 400 people coming a day. We were making about $800,000 a year gross. And that would allow us to do a whole bunch of things that no funder was going to touch in terms of like dealing with narratives related to North Korea or Palestine or even Afghanistan. Yeah. And it was a very collaborative project. It's working with communities in Pittsburgh and abroad from those nations.
That's right.
So,
and then some controversies.
Yeah. You know, probably 95% of the funding that made the thing go came from food sales, which was miraculous. We ended up, you know, at some point we'd have staff between 15 and 20 people, from researchers to kitchen. And that money wasn't all of the money. We also would seek like grants for specific projects. You know, we had a local foundation that when we focused on Iran canceled their funding. They didn't want us humanizing Iranian perspectives because of their political beliefs. Really, though, when we focused on Palestine. And this was 10 years ago, 2014. Wow. And so when we focused on that 10 years ago, we came under like extraordinary pressure. You know, people were coming to have me fired from my job at the university. There were organizations such as the Heinz Endowments, which is a great local organization, funds a lot of progressive causes, but had come under pressure because of their funding to Conflict Kitchen earlier, and they publicly disavowed their support. We received death threats. And it's just, you know, it's some bullshit. But it is a byproduct of a silencing of speech. And maybe to like even cut back to the economics of this, like we were good. Listen, we lose the Heinz Endowments or other funders, we're making money from food sales. And frankly, like people in the city, after we were now around for 5 years, we had thousands of customers who were deeply supportive of the project.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, that's where we realized the kind of the depth of relationships that we have built, that we weren't a grant funded project. You know, we were a city funded project by the people.
Right.
And even though that was like a kind of terrifying time, it was also incredibly empowering as well.
Yeah. I think, I mean, as I'm listening to you retell the story, some of which I lived here because I live here, I'm thinking about, you know, these labels around, you know, socially engaged artist, political activist, radical artist, etc. Like for me, for example, like I'm really reluctant to label myself socially engaged, radical, any of these terms, because I don't know, we don't have time to unpack why. But I'm curious for you, you know, those labels, do they feel natural? Do they feel true? And then when there are real threats of life, threats of resources, threats of whatever, you know, does it shift how you think about what you may or may not do?
Yeah, there's like political constraints, there's economic constraints, there's the constraints of how you construct your identity or how others place an identity on you. So like to take the latter, no, I'm not really interested in labels, and I find it problematic to kind of like perform within someone else's, you know, term. I also think like I want to have the flexibility from work to work to completely change my mind. And that to me is one of the like absolute beauties of being an artist, right? I can remake my identity and my work on a daily basis if I wish. The economic constraints are real, and I work within them. I work for nothing still. I do things that are just me and a bunch of friends making it happen. I do things that are waiting for other people to give me money so that they can happen. I have, projects that need money to scale, right? So good idea that I've started on myself, but to scale it, I'm going to have to find, others to get involved. So that's a reality I'm always negotiating. And then the sort of political pressures that, influence the work. I feel like for me, being an artist is always been an excuse to be more courageous in the world than I am on a regular basis. It's almost like this alter ego that gets to do the things that I secretly wish to do.
Yes.
And it gets me into various forms of trouble that I probably would shy away from if I didn't use the guise or structure of art and a practice to do so. And I'm a firm believer in, that whatever, the identities are fictional and shifting, and they're stories we tell. Mm-hmm. And as artists, we're always imagining new stories. So, whether there are personal identities, our group identities, or our national identities, which is something, I've been wrestling with for a while, how do we make others recognize this fiction? How do we have others play along with the kind of malleability of these stories and not see them as calcified things we're not involved in?
Mm-hmm. Because look where we are now.
Yeah.
What fictions are we remaking, holding on to?
Yeah. What things are we no longer considering fictions? We just consider them to be like realities that we can't shift.
That's right.
I think that feels always present, for any artist, probably in any era. Where is your resistance to the narratives that you have no agency within, right? Trickling down, policies that you don't see how they kind of move into like your daily life, but they do. Mm-hmm. So like if you think about your individual footprint, your footprint in relationship to the communities that you're with, if you see yourself as like having no agency at that realm, then you're sort of kind of buying into this larger narrative of you don't have agency,
anywhere. Yeah.
And we've got a lot of we have many parts of our cultural fabric that support that notion of a lack of agency. We all have to be beholden to lots of other things other than to ourselves, and also there's only so much you can do. That narrative, you're swimming in it.
Yeah.
So to have the idea that, oh wait, I might actually be able to do something here, make a choice, make different choices.
Yeah.
To come to that is a radical act in and of itself, and takes a good amount of effort, I think. Or something that helps you kind of awaken to the fact like, oh, you know what? I can do something about this.
Yeah.
Maybe. And I should maybe try.
Yeah. I think like in the political realm, if we don't take the politics at face value, much like we wouldn't take an artistic material just at face value, we reimagine it, or language or imagery, then what world could we build? What alternative could we construct? And who are we doing it with, and who are we doing it for?
And our students, are they up for that? They ready for that? Because I mean.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know if at my university, in our school, that's entirely the case. I think class costs a lot to go to our school.
What's the cost right now?
I think it's like just tuition's probably like 68 to 70, right? Then you're paying another 20. You're paying 90 to 100K if you're paying full boat, right? To go to the school. Now there's a lot of funding and aid that's given out. But I think, I love my students. I think they're amazing. But I think there's like, this idea of art school as a radical space to fundamentally question the thing put in front of you and remake it. I don't know if that's the case right now. I think a lot of students want to get jobs in industries that already exist. They want to fit into certain models of capitalism that don't need to be questioned in their minds.
Yeah.
And
I mean, when you're paying 90 to 100K, I mean,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
I think
that's
yeah,
wild.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a racket.
Yeah.
I'm happy I got a job. and I tried to make explicit, kind of like the terms under which we're learning, the institution under which we reside. Our university is the third largest defense contractor for an academic institution in the country. So no money's clean when it gets that big.
No.
And, there's amazing people on the ground. There's amazing faculty, amazing students, amazing administrators.
Yeah.
All trying to do good work. But there are some economic forces that are pushing people into silence and complicity and acquiescing. They're not all just like, hey, how do I get a job? And there's nothing wrong with how do I get a job, of course. Like we all, we need it. I think the formulation of questioning and the dealing with uncomfortable subjects and the moving through viewpoints that are not my own is the value of what an educational environment is, and creating like a curious, critical,
curious,
critical
citizen,
right, that has empathy at its base. They're looking for types of connections, like human, daily connections with people, with not only just like friends, but with strangers that they feel, through, the mediation of technology dislocated from.
Yeah.
And so there's like a growth in like ceramics, glass blowing,
that's cool.
Textiles, like students want to get their hands in things.
Yeah.
They want to just be hanging out and working on something slowly. They want to support other students who are having mental health crises. How could that be like almost like a subject of my work? They're trying to find a way to respond to the times in which they live. And I think that's really impressive and powerful, and I'm trying to meet them at that spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is about sustaining a life in the arts.
Yeah.
This podcast, this series, Art Power's work is about sustaining a life in the arts.
Yeah.
And so you said earlier, we can make a lot of things happen. You were in your 20s in San Francisco. I was in my 20s and 30s. Sometimes also some of it in San Francisco, some in Philly. There was a lot I was doing, and it was awesome. Couldn't still be doing it now though.
Right.
I need more sleep. I need, more exercise. There's just a lot more that it takes for me to show up in the world. Over time, it's not about a 15 minutes of fame. It's not about a quick, I'm trending. I'm trending now and I'm winning lots of awards, and then what? It's about a long term. I'm making a commitment. I'm choosing an artistic life, and I'd like to live in that choice for as long as I can. So with this idea of like sustainability, what advice would you offer to your students, or, just to folks now who have just now made the choice?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really powerful question. I think there's two ways to see it. One is economically, and one is like practically, emotionally, let's just say.
Yeah.
Because they're both really important. And oftentimes we just look at the economic models and we don't look at like what is emotionally going to sustain you. Like as everything happens in life, as family, as parents grow older, as all the stuff.
Yeah.
And that's mostly the conversations I'm having with friends.
Yeah.
Is, both actually, we talk a lot about money.
Yes.
You and I talk a lot about money.
We have, yes.
But we also talk about like you need to be in a community of others who are struggling alongside of you, holding you accountable, functioning as mentors, functioning as inspiration, functioning as therapists,
and resources, connecting you, inviting you, offering, sharing.
Right. Yeah. the rising tide lifts all boats metaphor is only true if all the boats are in the water, and that's not always the case. But I always tell my students who are often thinking like, well, how do I, build my practice? I'm like, you build your practice by building other people's practice alongside you. And when you do that, all those people are going to move in the world and going to help you. And it's not, unfortunately in the arts, and this might be different in the visual arts than it is in like, say, performing arts or theater, which are more collaborative. There's a notion problematic that you're alone in your studio and it's a solo thing, even for writers, right?
Yeah.
And some of that is true, but that negates the fact that you need others to bounce this stuff. Even writers are always talking.
Yeah, we have to talk. Yes.
Yeah. The work doesn't move
until
alone.
you do that. Yeah.
Until you do that. And we're doing it, but we don't talk enough about that as the emotional process that makes work flourish and continue. Because, really the only lesson I learned on how to be an artist is to like not stop doing it. And then, years later, you're like, oh, I'm an artist just because I just kept doing it.
Kept going, yes.
Yeah. So there's that. But then there's the economic side, which, right, and they're not fully overlapped. I teach. I could not do the work I do if I didn't have my day job. And my day job's easy. For real. Like, I've worked my life in difficult jobs. I teach twice a week. I show up to some faculty meetings. I will never complain about my job. I get paid well. I get summers off. I've made most of my work while I've had this gig. So some people will be like, oh, when you teach, you stop being an artist.
Right,
or it drags, people, I just have too much responsibility. I can't focus on the work. I'm like, I have so much less responsibility than I was really working. And that's not available for everyone to do, right? But everyone gigs. And that's the other thing I would say. Like, we're all gigging all the time, and we're often doing multiple gigs. And it's just real to take it seriously and not see it as like, well, when I get X, then I'll be really focusing on the work. And that could imply to anything. When I feel healthy, when I feel like emotionally ready, when I have, the right relationship or etc.
Yes.
I'll start making the work. You're gigging and you're making, and they're all, if you can keep the two going in supportive community, then, you can look back and say, wow, this is the way it happened.
Yeah. That feels like a very abundant way of thinking about it. I definitely encounter a lot of artists, many artists friends, who think of who have a kind of well, there's not enough space for all of us. Especially
like
in the world of the scarcity
Yeah.
mindset, especially when thinking about grants and prizes and residencies and opportunities and gigs even. Folks kind of start to tighten up, and they don't want to share. They don't want to talk about things, and there's gatekeeping and closed doors, and I don't have access, and we don't have access. I can empathize with the view that there aren't enough resources and there aren't enough opportunities, and things are tight and things are hard. And still, I really firmly believe you make your opportunities too. And you have to keep trying to make them, right?
Yeah. You write every day.
I write every day.
You write every day.
I do.
I have such respect. Really. Good times, bad times, whether any of it's being read or you're just sharing it with friends, you're writing every day. That's like really vital. And that's not a scarcity mindset. You have access to that daily. Listen, there are realities that people have that, and circumstances folks are coming from and moving towards that are difficult. And the arts, in any time, certainly in the times we're moving towards in culture wars, are going to be hard.
Yeah.
Funders are shrinking. It's just doing it on our own is going to be more and more important. I think doubt is the biggest impediment.
Doubt.
I think no one wants to talk about doubt. Doubt about the value, doubt about like the economics, doubt about whether I'm going to be great, whether I'm great now, whether
Does anybody care about these poems?
Does anybody care about these poems? Right. Yeah. That's like the dirty secret. We're in something like, we don't even know if we're doing a good job,
Yeah.
And like maintaining a space where you can remove doubt, be
Absolutely.
courageous, even if it's just on a daily basis writing. If you can hold that space and grow that space with others, then I think you create a world that allows creativity to like actually be fostered and flourish. That's a really difficult, tenuous, hard thing to do. I'm not just saying it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to live it and struggling like everyone else.
Yeah.
But I think if we recognize that, it's empowering.
Yeah. Thank you, Jon Rubin, for joining us for the Art Power podcast. I feel like we could keep talking. Our best conversations, I mean, we have so many conversations where I leave the conversation thinking we should have recorded that. That was a good one.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. One thing that's unique about Jon, he's a full-time professor in an established kind of traditional art school, which has its own constraints and limitations and opportunities. And that does not limit his practice to the school grounds. He's brought that teaching practice into the world, into the community. Jon offers a couple of paths for how you might stay anchored to teaching and still push ourselves and push our practices forward and stay very rooted and connected to what's happening in our communities. To learn more about Jon, visit jonrubin.net. The Art Power podcast is brought to you by Art Power, a public benefit corporation working to bring artists financial sustainability. This season is produced in partnership with Row Home Productions. This episode is produced by Jackson Roach and Kristen Vermelia. The managing editor is Alex Lewis, and the executive editor is John Myers. If you like the episode and you like the podcast, please subscribe and tell your friends. To find out more about our work at Art Power, visit us at artpower.io. I'm your host and executive producer, Janera Solomon. Thank you for listening.
Row Home Productions.